Hello and welcome to this new episode of PKM for Research. I'm really happy to be here every Sunday, either here on YouTube or on Twitter, to chat a little bit more about what is personal knowledge management for the purpose of research. So the goal for us to be here today is really to chat. So it's an open event. Let's say you can just ask me anything about PKM, personal knowledge management for research, maybe research skills, maybe how is life in academia, or any of those things that I have been talking a lot on Twitter and YouTube on my mailing list. So if you have any questions or just want to discuss anything, so feel free to join. We are live on YouTube and live on Twitter. So YouTube, if you're joining us through YouTube, you can find the live chat, so feel free to add any questions there, and I will be looking into that as we go along today. So for those who don't know me, my name is Bianca Pereira. I'm a researcher and a personal knowledge management coach. So my main focus in coaching personal knowledge management is in coaching for the purpose of research. How can we have capture all our ideas for the purpose of research? And when I talk about research, I don't mean just professional research, but also amateur research. So, from my perspective, anyone who uses critical thinking for the purpose of creating knowledge, for knowledge creation, is a researcher. So, if you create knowledge using critical thinking, reasoning, using facts, using arguments, so for in my eyes, you are an amateur researcher or a professional researcher if that's your everyday work. So, as part of the registration for this event today, I asked a few people to say, well, what questions do you have? Because if it's a Ask Me Anything event, so which types of questions would you like to ask to me? So I have compiled a list of questions and I'm going through them during the course of a maximum of 1 hour. So I'll not spend you a lot of your time in here. So I'll go through some of those questions. And then if you have any questions, feel free to drop in the live chat if you're joining us on YouTube, or to send a tweet and tag me on your tweet so I can take a look when the time comes. What are the questions that are coming through Twitter as well? So just put question and then add your question there, and then I'll be happy to answer that or discuss, or even the answer can be I don't know, who knows. So I think with that, I want to thank you for joining, and let's get started. Let's see what's the first question that I have here. This is a question that I received through the registration for this event. So and it's already, we start with hard one. So how do you move from many notes on different topics, from different sources, to a PKM structure that lets you find things when you need them? Well, it's hard because basically I said like, how do you do PKM? Tell me everything, like maybe 5 minutes. But what I can say is that the first thing that you need to think about when you talk about research, about personal knowledge management in general, is like, what do you want to manage? What do you want to manage? Because there are multiple areas of PKM. So when I talk about research, we want to manage our knowledge, the knowledge that we are creating, the knowledge that you're collecting, the knowledge that you're curating, all the knowledge that we are dealing with on a daily basis. We want to be able to have a central place to add that. So they're coming from everywhere. So what's the unit that you care about? Okay. So when I think about PKM for research, I think about how can I keep track of our ideas? So there are multiple areas of PKM. So I'm thinking first, what are the ideas that I care about? Because most of the time when I talk about different topics or different sources, we have all this, you have notes on a source, on a paper, we have notes on another paper, and then we have notes on a book, and we have notes on an experiment. So we have notes of all those, our ideas are fragmented. They are usually related to the source where they come from. So we take notes based on the sources where the ideas come from, where in fact, the important part is the idea itself. So why we don't take notes based on the ideas? So it's like, why don't we take one idea per note? Okay, each note that we have is one idea, and then if you want to keep track from where the ideas come from, and if you're doing research, you should. So then we should just like cite where this idea came from, what is the provenance, what's the source of that idea. So when you come from like having many notes on topics and sources, what I would say, we have many notes about ideas. So ideas are the core. And then we link to what are the sources that this idea came from. Is this an idea that came from analyzing my experiments, analyzing my data? Or is this an idea that came from reading a specific source? And what is maybe the part of the source that gave rise to that idea? So what if was maybe a conversation with another colleague or with someone maybe on Twitter, or maybe it was in this talk we were listening something and an idea came to your mind. Well, I had this idea when I was attending that event. So really the point is to have ideas, and then they link to the topics, they link to the source, they link to the different areas of that we have around those ideas, where the ideas came from. So that's what I would say. It is much easier for us to find an idea that we have on a note that we took than find a small note that we had on a paper that maybe we read once, okay, once or twice. So it's really hard to find what we are looking for if we're looking to a paper that we don't even remember which paper it was, rather than find an idea that we wrote and we read in another place. We are working with those ideas along our research. Okay. So, as I said, if you have any questions, drop them in the live chat or any comments. I will be more than happy to hear from you. So the next question that we have is, how do you use MOCs or other devices to synthesize what you have gathered? Okay, that's a very good question. And it's good because all the time, I think like all the time in research, what we are trying to do is like we have many sources and you want to say, what can you learn from them? Okay, what can you learn from all those different sources? So as I said, when you talk about synthesizing, we want to know what are the ideas, what is the knowledge that's coming from all those multiple sources. So the question about MOCs stands for maps of content, and that was a term that was created by Nick Milo. Okay, and there are other like let's say or other device. So when you are synthesizing information, you can think about MOCs. The MOCs, I think, the best concept for us to think about synthesizing, because MOCs are just nodes where you add information inside of that node from different areas. For example, what is an atomic node, what I call an idea node, has just one idea per node. A map of content is where you can put many ideas together in the same space so that it can generate a new idea. Okay, so when I talk about synthesizing, it means we want to take ideas from different papers and synthesize them and add them into a single place and create one structure that aggregates the knowledge coming from all of those. So, and then comes a catch. Okay, when I talk about atomic nodes, usually people differentiate atomic nodes and MOCs. I see them as the same thing. Because at the end of the day, an MOC can be an atomic node in the sense that it has just is focused on one idea. So when you have an idea node and you're saying, well, that's my claim, for example, that's the idea. There is a claim, that it's about that specific claim. If I find that idea in one paper, I can extract information adding that node. If I find the same idea in another paper, I can extract information and add in that node. So at the end of the day, that node is becoming the aggregator for the information coming from everywhere. Okay. And or you can decide, well, I will take different ideas. I want to aggregate them in the same space to create a new idea. Usually when you generalize a piece of part of knowledge, we just put all the links, for example, for the multiple atomic nodes, the links for the multiple ideas into a single space, and then we may give it a new label. So we're actually creating a new idea by putting all those ideas together. And that's the idea of the maps of content, for example, is to put different ideas in the same space to create a new idea. And as that map of concept is focused on a new idea now, is also, in my view, an atomic node in that sense. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. I see there are some comments in the chat, so I want to check to see if there are any Any questions about what I'm talking about? So there are a few new questions there, so I will keep an eye on them. So what is the next question? So the next question that we have here is more technical. Okay, it's more about tools. So using both Obsidian and Screentel, how do you transfer captured notes from one to the other? And that's very simple. Actually, Obsidian, all the notes are markdown files, and Screentel import markdown files. So the answer is really like, take all your notes wherever they are in your computer that were written in Obsidian, then you go into Screentel, say import, and Screentel import all of them, and that's it. The other way around is a little bit more complicated because at the moment, Screentel only allows you to export one note at a time. So you may need to go to each note and export the markdown file, and then add them to Obsidian. So there is the other way around is a little bit harder, but from Obsidian to Screentel, it's super easy. Okay. So the next question is a follow-up. So do you lose anything by adding things into Screentel? Connections or context in one versus another? If you add from Obsidian to Screentel, you don't actually lose much. Actually, you gain a little bit, unless you use a lot of plugins in Obsidian. If you're using pure Markdown, everything is ready to use in Obsidian. But if you use a lot of plugins, the plugins will not exist in Screentel. Okay, if you use, let's say, ScaleDraw, it will not work in Screentel. If you use DataView, like use more the YAML part of the notes, it will not work on Screentel. But then the other way around, like Screentel adds something that I really value, which is the idea of boards. Okay, so you can create boards that this idea doesn't exist in Obsidian. Okay, you can create maps of content, which are those special notes, but you cannot create boards where you can have all the cards inside of that board, and then you can, and the board itself becomes some sort of a card itself. Maybe to help, if I can actually show what it looks like. So let me see if I can share my screen. Screen top is here. So I can just clear my desk here. So I can just, I'm here, I can create my cards, card A, text A, okay. Text B, and they will all appear in my desk. So at any moment, I can create like as if like a context. I can create that, and I can click here, and I can create a new board, and it automatically creates with the date, and I can give it a name if I want to. Okay, so technically I could use those, and I can search my archive and put all notes here. And let's suppose that I'm working on a given paper. I want to synthesize information. I can put all the notes that I care about that I want to synthesize into a single board, and then I can create a new note where I can write up all the synthesis that what I'm having on the screen. I can put colors into them. I can connect them. If I do like this, so I can link to the test A, and the link itself will appear here in my board. And if I want to go back, I can, well, I would say leave this board for later. I can come back to my desk. Okay, I can remove them from my desk now. So clear the desk, I can start working on something else. And if I want to go back to that, I can just go into boards, and I have the board there exactly as I left. So this is really good for working on specific projects, or you are, let's say, changing the context in which you are creating knowledge, changing the context that we are working on. So each context can become a board, and I can actually even link to a board. So if I add a link, I can actually link to the board. So when I click, it will just open this board here. Okay. So, and that's something that is not that easy to do in Obsidian. You cannot actually do that in Obsidian. You could draw things in ScaleDraw, but you need to add things by yourself. but then it will not be as easy as it is in Screen. So I hope that helps. And before we go into the comments that I have here, the questions that I have here on the live chat on YouTube, I have a last question that came through the registration form. And this one was more, I said, more of a comment than a question. It was like a whole context. Well, this is my context. I want something around project management. Do you have any ideas for that? So I just rewrote the question and what I think the question actually was. So, how to do project management when information is scattered across apps? Okay, so how can I do something related to a project management when all the information, all my notes are in different apps, all my tools are in different apps? Unfortunately, there is not a very good do this and you'll be perfect. Okay, we still live in a world where each app wants wants you to have all your content in their app. So it's really hard sometimes to integrate the different applications. That's why movements like the one that Obsidian subscribes to, it's really like you have your files, use them wherever you want. If Obsidian is good enough, then you use it for Obsidian. It's something that is really valuable because then you own your data, you have your files, and then you can bring them anywhere. There are some movements on the internet which is really like you should own your data, you should own all your information, and the apps should borrow it when you want to use that app. We are not there yet. So the best thing we can do at the moment, there are a few things, and those are related to links. Okay, so many apps nowadays, they are web applications, so you can have a link directly to a note, directly to a to-do, for example, directly to the unit of information that you care about. And the best option would be like choose one which is your dashboard or your command center or like your home. And then from there, you can access all the other areas. And in research, I would say that like you are managing your ideas and you have actions that are actions to generate those ideas. You have outputs that express those ideas. So you will have all those areas, but then your core is like which idea I'm working with or which idea wants to build. So from there, from wherever you choose to be your idea center, if you like, then where else can you point from there? So that would be my my suggestion. There are some apps as well that I don't remember the name is Hook, something like that, where it creates links between apps. I never use it myself. I want to look into that, but it seems that has a very good potential for creating direct links between resources in apps. So that's something that maybe it's worth to take a look as well. Apart from manually adding the links to the different apps. So let's take a look here at the comments a little. Okay, we have a question from Anne. Do you keep your literature or source notes separate from your idea notes? And my answer is yes. But then the question is like, what are literature or source notes? Okay. I have what I call input notes, and then idea notes and output notes. Separate my notes in three broader categories only, okay, so far at least. And I'm talking just about ideas and files, not to do yet. So the ideas themselves, they're described in the idea notes. But then I have those input notes. And what are those? They are notes that stand for something, okay? They stand for notes. They stand for example, paper. They stand for any source that I have, or they describe a situation I have, let's say a meeting note. So they describe something that is not my ideas, okay? They are a fact of something that happened where I can reflect on that, I can analyze that, and then extract and create my ideas from that. So what I have is I have my note, which is the literature note, which is input note, and it's just like what's the title of a paper, for example, and the author and things like that. And then I link from my notes into that note. And the main reason is that if I link directly to the paper itself, from my notes to the paper, it's hard for me to answer the question, which ideas I have that are linked to this paper, okay? Because the paper is outside of my PKM where I store my notes. But if I create a note that represents the paper, what happens is every time I link to that note, I can now see what are all the ideas that link to this note by just navigating to the backlinks. Okay, so I think it's worth for me maybe to share that. Let's say my decision here. I have some very old notes, but it will show what I mean. So let's see again if I can. Okay, share my screen. And oopsie. Okay, so I have a paper here, and this is input. I don't know, can you see something? I don't know if you can see. Yeah. So here I have my paper. Okay, so this is what I call an input note. It just stands for the paper. It has bibliographic information, what is the document, and what is the original source. I may have some summary here. But then if I want to know what are other notes that link to it, okay, I can just come here and I can see what are all the notes that mention it. You can just really close. Okay, I can see all the notes that are linking to this paper, okay, to what will be the papers. But if I link directly to the paper, to the source which is outside, I don't have this information. I don't have those backlinks so that I can look at them. So that's why I like to create a note that I call an input note, which will be a literature note, that stands for the paper, that represents the paper that I read, and then all the ideas, all the things that are, when every time I'm talking about that paper, I just link back to that paper. So that's how I would be working with my literature notes. And I hope it helps. And so let me know in the comments if that helps. So let's see, the next one is from Eneko. So many of the articles and literature about Zettelkasten and PKM are related to social sciences and linking in statements and ideas. How would you approach PKM for engineering topics? Well, I'm for computer science. So this is the thing. We tend to think that like statements, ideas, they are only for social sciences, but actually it's an argument. We are creating an argument. When you are in engineering and you do an experiment, we are saying, I'm doing an experiment that can either support or go against a given argument. Okay, there is a reason why we are doing that experiment. So there is the reasoning for doing that experiment. We have a question that we want to answer, or even the questions like, can I improve this algorithm in like 1%? Given this, and that. So that's an argument that they're creating. And the experiment is actually showing, supporting or not that argument that you're creating. So at the end of the day, we have ideas, we have statements as part of our research as well. When we are doing the analysis of our experiments, we are getting insights from that. So those insights, they are ideas, they are statements, they are things that say, well, my data shows that X. Okay, so that X is an idea. And that can be linked to the other ideas to create an argument, for example. So what I would say is that in engineering, computer science, in technology areas, in science, we are also, we should also be using statements and ideas. It may be less clear because if you go, I just have I have facts, I have data, but actually those are things supporting our arguments. So the arguments are composed of statements. So I hope that helps. So let me know in the chat if you have any follow-up questions. So, okay, there is a follow-up question for Eneko, but let me know if the previous one works or not. So Anne said, do you keep your input notes in a separate folder? In the past, yes. In the present, no, because I don't use folders anymore. So if you use, for example, Notion, or if you use Screentool, or if you use Chrome as well, you don't actually have folders. So how can you even like add anything to a separate folder? And even using Obsidian, I was like, well, you know what? When I was using folders, it was stopping a little bit my workflow. It's making it slower because I was stopping using navigation through the links and using a lot of the folder just because it was easy, it was just there. And I saw that it was actually not helping me in deal with my own thinking, in exploring my own thinking. Some notes, I will never come back to them or just become lazy a little bit. I said, you know what? Let's try to be folderless and see how it goes. And you can still separate information by using tags, for example. Because an advantage of tags is that you don't need to care if something's in one tag or the other tag. You know, it can be on both, for example, if you really need that to be the case. So I have a tag which is now called input, and I have which is a source, and I have a tag for output. So I don't use folders anymore. Okay. And in Obsidian, if you want to use a separate folder for all your inputs, because I want my inputs to be on one specific place, that's good as well. You can do that because for Obsidian, you can link things between folders. Obsidian doesn't care, so you can do that if you wish to. Okay, and I could say that clarifies. Okay, so well, thanks a lot. So if you have any further questions, just as I say, drop them in the chat. I'll take a quick look on Twitter as well if there are questions there. Otherwise, I will go back to the list of questions that we have. So maybe that can spring out some ideas for you. And what I want to ask you, like, if you are on Twitter, let's make some noise. I always like saying, let's make some noise. Go there, share your opinions, share your thoughts, share your ideas, because I always like to say, actually, Twitter can be a place for note making. If you want to do public note making, any tweet can be an idea and a note, so you can express those notes. It will be hard for us to maybe look at those later, but it's very good for sharing and sometimes growing our ideas through conversation, because when you enter in a chat with someone else, our initial idea will grow because we try to create an argument with them, okay? We start saying, well, what about that? Well, we haven't thought about this. Well, I disagree. So Twitter is a very nice place just to have a quick jot your ideas down and then have some feedback. So if there was any aha moment that you got from here today, any insights, any comments, any questions that you have, feel free to add a question on Twitter, and you can tag me at Bianca_OLI_PER there as well. Okay. So let's see our next question. How to connect my PKM to my research outputs? Okay, we talked about connect them to the inputs, but how can we actually connect them to the outputs? And I find it interesting because that is the topic of the course that I'm just launching, and we start tomorrow the course. So the idea is that, as I said before, we are creating arguments. Okay, so how can we use? The question is like, how can we use our PKM system to build arguments? And then those arguments we can represent in many forms. You can represent as text, you can write a research paper, or you can write a blog post. It's the same argument. The language that you use to write that argument down may change depending on the audience, okay? Depending on the style of the output that you are talking about, you want to express that. It can become a presentation. For example, TED Talks are arguments, okay? So that's one of the things I'll be talking about. It's like, how can you break a TED talk into an argument, and how can you actually use our PKM system to build that argument? So it's one of the things that we'll be talking about in the course, along with like how to create atomic nodes and all those things. So the way for me to connect the PKM to research outputs is really on the way how the PKM is structured. So when we talk about PKM for research, it's really like, how does the structure of our PKM converts into create an argument? Okay, so the decisions on what you write in a note, I think, is the main decision that you can have, and how do you connect the note is a second decision. And those two, only those two decisions can actually bring us to make an argument, create an argument easy, or make it very hard. Okay, so the way how I approach that is that the notes, they are ideas, so they are either objects, okay, things that we are defining, or they are claims, they are statements, they are things that we believe that are true, let's say, or that are not true. Okay, so, and if you think of an argument, what is an argument? The premises, 1, 2, 3, many premises that gives that leads to a conclusion. Okay, so those are claims that together leads to a conclusion. So if you think backwards, if you're writing about the conclusion, you're writing a note that is an idea note. Okay, one idea per note, and this note is the conclusion of an argument, and you are explaining the reasoning inside of the note. Why? What is the claim about, and what is the reasoning for it? You are automatically linking to the other claims that gave origin to that conclusion. So when you do that, your PKM, you are already creating the argument in the structure of the PKM. So that's why I say that is PKM for research. Okay. So the way for us to connect our PKM to the research output is by embedding the very thing that we want to create, which is a research argument, in the structure of our nodes and our relationships. So I really hope that makes sense, and I really be happy to talk a little bit more about that and about the course as well, if you have interest in learn more about it. So the next one, how to tie different sources of information into a central location. Well, the way is a little bit related to the previous question that we have. What is the idea is like, we have this, what I call the input nodes. So the input nodes, I use that, as we cannot have everything to a single place at the moment. I use those as interface. The input nodes are interface between the outside world and my ideas themselves, my notes. Okay, so when I have a source of information in different locations, they are still there. Sometimes you cannot do anything about that, but I can create a node that represents that source of information, and then link my ideas to that node. Okay, and then when I want to go into the source of information itself, from the idea to the source, I can open my idea node, I can click on my reference to the input node, and from the input node, I have the link to the original source. And if I want to do the other way around, I want to see from the source to the ideas, then I go to the input node that represents that source and use the backlinks to find all the ideas that are related to that source. So that's how I would tie the different source of information into a central location. Okay, I think the word here is really good, is tie. How can you tie them rather than just aggregate them? Because currently it's really hard to find a tool that is good enough to just aggregate everything. Okay. I have one more question here on the chat from Anne. So do you use DataView or another plugin to filter different types of notes? No. Yes and no. Okay. I'm currently moving from Obsidian into Scrinto, so that's why, like, sometimes I show people Obsidian and still like my old types of notes sometimes. So in Obsidian, yes, I use DataView, and I have, like, let's say, reading list. You know, these types of things. Let's say I'm reading, or it's like to read, or which step that I am in the process of reading. For example, I use tags, and then I will use DataView to list just to create a kind of like a dashboard of where I am now with my reading list, with the things I need to process, what should I do today, for example. For input notes, I could have, but I didn't find a reason for creating the links for them. But what I do have is from outputs, and that was me all the time. Let's say I have some things. I have my atomic says that I publish on Twitter. I have my newsletter. I have other forms of communication that I write or I create. So then I have different tags, like output and the type or where it was published. I had a few tags for those things. And then I will use the DataView to list those things. But yeah, I don't use it that much. And now that I start to use more Scrimptle, as I'm using tags anyway, I can just say, well, give me all the notes with that tag, which I could use also in Obsidian. The other thing that in Obsidian is nice that you have, say, a note with all the links, and you can add more information into the note. So that's something nice, and I hope that maybe one day Scrimptle will add that as well. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's in the roadmap. It's a type of thing that they want to do. So DataView is very powerful. If you are really, say, Obsidian is my thing, I would say use DataView, but use it with caution, because sometimes you think that DataView will do everything, and sometimes it's better if you do a manually assembling the links so that you can generate new knowledge rather than rely on DataView, because DataView is very good for indexing. It's just like, show me everything that I have on X and maybe do some filtering. But if you want to really play with the information, move the information around, then sometimes it's better to do it manually, because then you're really thinking more deeply what the ideas are, how do I connect them, which ideas should be here, which ideas should not be here, and how it can become something broader or more general if you're trying to synthesize information, for example. I hope that helps. That was the previous one. So we have another one about Obsidian. How can I write a document in Obsidian using those broken down atomic notes without the document feeling really disconnected and clunky? Yeah, that's actually really good. The main question here, like, what do you mean by document in Obsidian? Okay. I like to think that we don't write documents in Obsidian. And that's one of the, when I talk about, let's say, atomic notes, I talk in the context like you should not write documents, you should write ideas, okay? Because in a document, we have the full argument. We have many ideas mixed in there, and it's really hard to tell them apart later. Because when you are searching for something, let's say, I'm writing my paper now, I wrote a sentence, and I want to find the reference of the papers that support that claim that I'm making that sentence, okay? Or that show the definition of that thing that I'm saying that sentence. That you can look at. So if I'm that stage, I'm looking, what is the paper? What's the source that supports this idea? So we are looking for an idea, not for a document, okay? So if my PKM is based on documents, okay, journal from Monday, journal that I wrote on my thoughts on Monday, or report that I wrote for I don't know where, or like, you know, if my PKM is based on all those sort of documents, it's really hard to know later where is the idea, because I need to remember what was a document that was related to the idea, where did I wrote it, so that I can find the document, open the document with a lot of stuff, and then try to read to identify what is the piece that I was looking for. Because sometimes you say, well, there's a document here, we just put quotes, put everything into there, and then just move on. And that's what I would say. That may be a danger, because it's really hard sometimes to find the ideas that we're looking for. Where is our notes are the ideas themselves, and that's why the title of the notes is very important, because that represents the idea. This is something that reminds me of that idea, which is usually the claim itself. So if I'm writing my paper, I have a sentence, I'm looking for a reference about that idea, I will look for the idea, and I have already the note with all the references in a single place. So it's just like copy, paste. Those are my reference, copy to my output, and there we go. So that's one of my, this part of the answer to this question. And I think the second part is this feeling of clunkiness. And I feel a little bit of that in Obsidian as well. Because sometimes we say, well, I just want it to be one idea, right? But an idea sometimes when I define, let's say, defining something, it may have parts, okay? So let's suppose in my research, I was defining a method, okay, for personal development planning. And this method had multiple steps, okay? So there are like 4 steps. And sometimes when you are dividing things, you say, well, it's much easier to read if I just have like a subheaders into the same note rather than different notes. And the feeling of clunkiness, I believe, comes from the way how we can navigate Obsidian, which is you open a note, you click on a link, you open another note on a board tab on the side, and then if you open another note, then everything gets squished, you know. And or if you're in mobile, it's even worse. Like you open one note, when you open the second, the first note disappears, it goes somewhere. Okay, so it gives the feeling like, well, I just want to have a view of all in one place because I want to read down the note and maybe come back to the overview, then read down again and then come back. So that's I see as a problem of Obsidian, whereas it's something that's exactly something I really like on Screentalk, because it's screen to have your desk with multiple notes and you can open them in the same screen. And even in mobile, you can have 2 notes, you can just swap them. So I find that's one thing that I really like in Screentalk is how to navigate our notes, them being atomic in this case. So I don't need to care, maybe it should be a subheader. They can be atomic and you can still navigate without this feeling of this clunkiness. It's like, I want to read this, but I want to go back to this again. So how can I have my multiple notes? Okay, so that's, I think, my two parts of my answer to this question. Okay. I just noticed there are more questions here on the YouTube chat. So let's see. So Andrew, okay, what's the main driver for you to make the transition to Screentalk? Well, I talk a few of them here. I'm still in the process. I'm still like I'm going, but it's like it's so good because I say, okay, I will start creating the things. For example, I created the whole curriculum of my course in Screentalk now. So I just imported the things from Obsidian some time ago, and I keep exporting when I create something in Obsidian. And I just decided to go full in with Screentalk. But I still sometimes concerned because I like to have my files, you know. I like to have the offline mode, and they are creating the offline mode. It's just a matter of time now. So any day it can just appear. So that's really good. And the main thing that makes me change, one is this idea of the clunkiness that Obsidian, this feeling of clunkiness that I just talked about in Obsidian, where you be like open a note, open a note. So if you want to have an overview of things, you can just like, like how can I have multiple notes open without that overwhelm? It's like, what I was reading again? Because I am the type of person, then I'm writing something that I suddenly I appear on Twitter, let's say, and like your mind somehow goes somewhere and then you click on a tab and suddenly you are in another place, and then I think, what was I doing again? What I was in this tab or another tab in the browser, or was I in Obsidian? Where was I? So that's what I really don't like in Obsidian, because with so many things open, sometimes I'm in a note and I'm like, what I was doing again? My mind just goes. Whereas in Screentalk, you can have this notion of a desk or of a board, and you can create a context in which you are working on. So I really like that, and for me, it makes me much easier to navigate and create atomic nodes specifically. And with the notion of the board, okay, I can have, it's much easier to synthesize information. I can have all the nodes that I care about into a single place. It's even an infinite canvas, so you can put as much as you want there. Although like if you put too much, it'd be hard to synthesize things. But I think it was the main reason for me to move it to Screentalk. And the unique thing that I'm still waiting for is the two things are the offline mode, and the second one is to have the ability to just click a button and download all my notes, okay? So I can have my own backup, my own files with me. So that's something that is really important for me. And that's something that I love in Obsidian for that, okay? So okay, yeah, that was the question. Okay, that's cool. So thanks a lot, Andrew, for the question itself. And we're just 14 minutes to the end of our session. So as I say, if you have any questions, just put them into the live chat, or you can ping me on Twitter if you are watching this through Twitter. I still have a few questions to go through, but if you have any, I would be more than happy to just jump in and answer. Okay. So what is the next question in our schedule here? Let me see. So does the idea mean it should have reasons and a conclusion? And how do I know that's an idea that should be in a separate note? And I'll say this is the hardest question. And that's one of the things that I want to make sure that we go, especially in the course itself, because we all talk about knowledge, for example, but what is knowledge? How do you define the knowledge? Or when I talk about idea notes, so the question is like, what is an idea? And the way, and that I think it's personal, okay? Not the way how take notes about ideas, but how do you define ideas or the ideas that you care about? So in my perspective, when I'm talking about ideas, I'm talking about something that I'm focused on, okay? And when it comes to research, for example, especially, for example, thinking the process of developing ideas, sometimes we start with a topic, and then that's enough, okay? Then we say, this is the topic, this is the definition, and I'll talk about it in this note, what the topic is, and all. But then, as our knowledge evolves, like, well, this is too broad. I don't care about this, only about this whole topic. Actually, it has parts that I care about. So then I want to break that idea down, okay? Then I want, okay, now those parts becomes their own idea, and then they get linked to the original broader one, okay? So that's one of the things. Or like, so when we are talking about idea, the boundaries of an idea are very artificial, okay? So we create those boundaries of what is in the idea or what is not. So my way of saying is like, just write whatever you want, okay? Free writing, put ideas out, breaking down what you see as different ideas. And the main question, if we should break down even more or not, is if two ideas are competing for your attention inside the same note, they should be in separate notes. Okay? I'll repeat again. If two ideas are competing for your attention inside of the same note, then they should be different notes. Okay? Because my definition of what I call atomic notes or idea notes are notes where you focus on a single idea. It's not that the note contains an idea, okay? Because we're like, what's to contain an idea? The boundaries of an idea are artificial, okay? We create them. So it's a note that focuses on one idea. It can have multiple ideas in there, but those multiple ideas only serve for the purpose of supporting that key idea that is you want to represent in the note. If the secondary idea is there, competing for attention, competing for the focus inside of the note, then that second idea maybe should have their own note and just have the link within the idea, the note that we are creating. So that's what I mean by having a focus on a given idea. Okay? So that's why I know if the idea should be in a separate note or not. So we can have maybe two more questions, and then we'll finish for today. So if I find an idea in a single paper, how can I make sure to connect it to later incoming notes on the same idea? That's a very good one. Because it's really like, okay, I took all these idea notes, they're linked everywhere, I have like thousands of notes, and I found just an idea. Should I create a new note? Or should I try to find the note where I should add it? Because it's the same idea. And I would say it's the best effort approach, okay? In any like PKM, say, oh, this is a perfect solution, this is a perfect solution. I think in any PKM, what the best is, what you can do is actually act on a best effort. We give our best effort to create, organize our PKMs, and maybe not have duplications, maybe just have one note, one idea, okay? But I think you should just try your best to, if you cannot find, just create a new note on the knowledge that at some point we will find there are two notes about the same idea, so you can merge them. You can just merge them, okay? So when you're searching for an idea, you say, well, I was searching, actually found 2 or 3 notes that are kind of similar, they talk about the same idea, so I'll just take this time and merge them into a single note. So don't be so worried about having multiple notes, you know, or not find that specific note that moment, but then you find a little bit later. Because one of the important things of working on our PKM is that we review our notes. It's not like I took a note, I dump in there, and that's it. It's in there, you know, it's stored on an archive. They are living notes. We should be looking into the notes frequently. We should be reviewing them. We are growing our knowledge. So if you're growing our knowledge, growing our ideas, we should be revisiting our notes to add more stuff in there, see what's going on, how we can connect them to other things. So at some point you will find if there are two notes similar to each other or on the same idea. Okay, if you are always interacting with the place where you're doing management of your ideas. So I would say is a best effort. Do your best effort, and knowing that you are reviewing your notes. If you are not reviewing your notes, the note may be lost forever and never find. So that would be my personal take on that. So our last question, we still have a few, but due to the time, our last question. So does note linking and research differ for active academics and the general personal knowledge management enthusiasts? I really like that because I talk like there is the active academics, which I suppose mean professional researchers, and there are what I call the amateur researchers. So what I see is that, for example, there are two things here. One, idea management, which I'm most of the time talking about, and the other is PKM in general. Okay, so when you're talking about idea management, I see that anyone who is creating knowledge by using critical thinking is an amateur researcher. So the way how we do PKM for research is the same, regardless if you are amateur or a professional. Regardless if your sources are peer-reviewed papers or if your sources are blog posts or opinions of different people. The main difference is that how strong your argument can be. Okay, if an argument is maybe building on opinions, well, not that strong. If it's based on experiments, analysis, and like a group of people try to attack even an idea to see how good the idea, if that idea stands, okay? So that's a little bit more stronger argument. But the way how we manage ideas, I see as the same, okay? Yeah. But when it comes to personal knowledge management, it's hard to say like, is it the same for everyone? Because there's a whole world of personal knowledge management, okay? Some people like they just like manage the whole life in there. They manage their feelings sometimes. Like, what do I do when I have a feeling this way? Some people will just do like project management strictly, and then maybe and there are different ways of doing project management. So maybe what works for one person, even if both are professionals, will not work for another one. So there is that aspect. I wouldn't say that PKM is the same for everyone, although there are some basic principles that everyone can consider if they want to apply to their PKM. Okay, but when it comes to PKM for research, okay, I think there are many similarities. So the principles will be the same, and then each person needs to apply the P, it's personal, to actually modify everything to their own use case, to their own preference, their way of thinking, to their way of working, their own beliefs as well, and the tools that they love and want to use at the end of the day. So this was our last question for this Ask Me Anything episode. I hope you enjoyed. I definitely need like 2 liters of water now because I spoke a lot. I'm not used to speak that much. I like more to listen to what other people are saying rather than me speak. But I really hope you enjoyed. I really hope the answers were useful and that is something that can bring some ideas to your own PKM. So if you have any comments, any questions, I would love to hear your thoughts. If there was any aha moment, something that something just came to mind, and is I will apply that to my PKM. I really would love to hear from you. So reach me out on Twitter at Bianca underscore OLI underscore PER, and I'll put at the bottom of this video when the video is out on YouTube. And I hope to talk to you on Twitter or in the next event, which is happening on next Sunday, where I'll be talking about tools for thought trends. What are the trends in the tools for thought environment? And I'll be talking with Andrew Altschuler about that. So I'm really looking forward to that. So until then, I hope everything is good with you. So thanks a lot for coming, and see you soon.